Hey everybody, welcome to another inspiring episode of FoundersGyan. This is episode 30 and this week we are featuring the founders of Delyver, that is Delyver.com. They are Afsal Salu, Praful, Thachery and Reebu Varghese. Delyver was India's first hyperlocal delivery service and they even are probably the first to even use this term in India. This was way back in 2010 when startups went so big. They recently got acquired by BigBasket. We had such a great time and good fun in recording this episode. I do hope you find it useful and interesting too. Do check out the show notes over at www.foundersgyan.com/EP30. This contains all the links to things we talk about on the show. Also check out foundersgyan.com/top for the top listened podcasts on the site. This is updated every single week. Alright, I think that's enough for an intro. Fasten your seatbelts and let's get started. Praful, Afsal and Reebu, welcome to the show. I'm super glad and pumped to be meeting with you today. A quick brief on the trio. They are the founders of Delyver, a hyperlocal delivery startup which probably was the first in India. Not only that, Delyver also pioneered various business models like first aggregator for home cooked meals, first to introduce no minimum order in home delivery, etc. They were last year acquired by BigBasket due to their wild success. All three were batchmates in IIM Lucknow. Guys, great to meet you and thanks a lot for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your knowledge, wisdom and time with our listeners. Thank you for agreeing to be on the show.
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay, so can you guys fill in the blanks from the intro about your journey before Delyver? What were you doing? How did you... we will talk about the origin of Delyver, but we'll just talk about just before Delyver, what were you guys doing? You could just give some salient points on...
So actually all of us are engineers from different colleges. We met at IIM Lucknow. We were at the 2004 batch of IIM Lucknow. So after this thing, all of us went our separate ways. So I was with Philips and was doing sales in the initial and then doing marketing with Philips in the lighting division. I was based out of Gurgaon.
So from campus I joined Hindustan Unilever. Where I was with the IT and supply chain team. So I worked for 6 years with Livers before starting up Delyver along with Praful and Reebu.
Yeah, so I joined Wipro from campus, part of their consulting division, did projects for the first 3 years, then moved to the Middle East. I was based out of Dubai, handling the Middle East and Africa markets, business development essential.
Okay, excellent. Now, let's talk a bit about the origin of Delyver. So, we all know about Delyver and of course BigBasket, but how did you guys come up with the idea for this in the first place? So, maybe one of you could take it.
So, we had two reasons why we got together and started off with Delyver. One was that, while we were in campus itself, for some startup competition event, we had actually written a case study, which a business plan which was very similar to the idea of Delyver, right? Second was that an on-demand kind of a business where you could get your needs satisfied within this thing within probably a 60 minutes or a short time period was something where we thought there was a pain point while we were having our lives, after campus, So there was a need which was felt, and then there was a background to it, and hence that was the genesis of Delyver as an idea.
Okay, so is it like you are feeling the pain point for groceries, household groceries, or
not just groceries? As people living in, let's say I was in Gurgaon, right? You wanted anything. It could be food. It could possibly be that vegetable when your maid has come on to cook. So many of the things from your neighborhood retail outlet. So Delyver was hence the first hyperlocal commerce business, and we were beyond groceries. We were into grocery, food, we were delivering from
Cakes,
cake
flowers.
shops, flower shops, all those kind of stuff. But anything which is hyperlocal and on demand.
Okay. Okay, excellent. So now for our budding founders listening out there, can you tell us how to come up with a good idea? So Reebu is pointing.
Afsal's the idea man.
Okay, so Afsal's the idea man. So we will let Afsal answer this. How do you come up with a winning idea?
Good. Nowadays startups have become so popular, and it's a fad to say that you are an entrepreneur or startup founder.
Yes.
That wasn't the case when we started up way back in 2010. And at that time, we realized that it is not only about the idea. It's also about flawless execution.
Right.
Followed up. So we looked at various market opportunities that would be across multiple sectors. So even if you have identified a sector, it is very important to identify the size of that market as well. So first is the idea, then estimating the market in terms of whether there are other players, whether there are global comparables in the same space, how big that market can be in future. Followed up with a plan which would identify how to scale it up. So it's applicable for any idea.
Yeah. Okay. So I think
I would just add to this, Vicky. More often that since we have interacted with a lot of founders also, what we have found is that somewhere it is that they have experienced a pain which was probably that something which on their own personal experiences. So there are many stories of many startups where they started off because the founder felt there was a gap in the whole thing, right? So, for example, if you look at it today, right? I mean, recently we all had kids, and if I go to a particular this thing, the whole vaccination thing starts up.
right.
And you go to the hospital today, it's all still a largely manual process. You know, each vaccination, you have to put a sticker somewhere, keep it in storage, make sure that the vaccination, this thing happens. There is nothing that is solving or easing the pain around, you know. And then you look at it, okay, you're feeling this. Now, you look at it in a larger aspect of it. There is, your medical records are all still in paper, mostly. You know, you don't have a consolidated place. So there is, now you feel there is a place for people to really get in and solve a pain point which really exists, right? So now it's up to the guy, if he's an entrepreneurial guy, to now do something about it. Right. So I think more and more, I mean, you need not probably be thinking too much of this thing. Probably from your own experiences, you could come up with an advice.
So that's a good point. I just want to talk a bit more on that now. The next question is ideation to creation. So what does a person need to do in order to make the idea into a reality? Now, obviously, a personal pain point is a very good starting point, but may not necessarily be the idea for a startup, right? So, is that part of ideation to creation? Is that part of ideation where you look at the market size and say, okay, is there a big enough market? Will people pay for this? You know, which part would you say it is? Is it idea or ideation to creation?
So, if you see, very often many of the hugely successful companies in the world started from a personal pain point. So, if you take Uber, for example, the founders, it started as a project for the founders to hitch rides across San Francisco, right? And then it just grew from that. If you look at Facebook, well documented, you know, he set it up to take out pain from his heart, you know, to do it, and that's how it came out, right? So very often the best ideas are from personal pain points. Doesn't mean that all ideas will scale or become large companies, right? The idea itself, you know, should have some merit in it that it starts scaling, right? So what I would say is, you know, don't try to ideate to build a business. You ideate because you really want to solve something. If that happens to be a big business, wonderful about it, right? That's when the passion really shows, and that's when you really get onto something, right? That's what I would say.
Okay.
So you're not building companies for valuation alone.
Right. Okay. You're building something to solve a problem, right? So that's I think the key takeaway here. Now, let's talk a bit about ideation to creation. Now, what should a person need to do? Okay, let's say they have identified a pain point. They understand that it's a real problem. Other people have the problem. They want to solve the problem. So what are the steps they need to do in order to make the idea into a reality? I mean, one of you could just maybe take the case of Delyver itself and walk us through the steps that you took once you had the idea. What did you do? Did you build a prototype? Did you go to market? Did you do multiple things? What was the thought process like?
Yeah. So immediately after the idea comes the team. Even before you start moving into the creation space, because first you'll have to identify whether you have got the right skill set within the team.
Right.
It could be within the founders or with the team which you would have built, which will help you create that product or service. So in terms of identification of skills which are available within the founders, it's very important that you look at whether you have complementary skills within the team, whether there is any particular role which is missing from the co-founder's skill set, which you will have to look at bringing from outside and then putting it in place first. So then only the right product can be created.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that first from whatever the idea that you are having, you need to be able to chalk out to see how are you going to add value to the customer, right? And pain point that you have, how are you going to set about solving that pain point, right? And is it going to really add either convenience or save time or money for your customer? So once it is majorly about a convenience or saving time and money for the customer is where most of the businesses play around, right? So in that particular case, then you work around to see whether how you're going to leverage technology to do that, how you're going to build up teams to do that, how you're going to who all are there other people who share the same passion about this. All those kind of stuff starts coming and putting you can put all those things into place, right? I would say if you ask me also, one of the best ways of creating a company is also that once a few of these earlier stages are solved, answers are found on the ideation stage. If the person is a person who's working now, you leave your job so that and just start. Right. Yeah. So then a lot more things start falling into place. That's what we have found at least.
Right. Okay. Excellent answer. Now we all hear about founders sacrificing family time to make their ventures a success. Tell us about your own family and how you manage to balance family and business. I think all three of you should answer this because sure.
So from my I was married to a batchmate of ours from my own Lucknow, right? So we had we always knew that we would start up at some point in time, right? And we had kind of an agreement in which she would be supporting the family through the first 2-3 years of the entrepreneurial journey, and then we will take a call at the end of 3 years as to how to because you are sacrificing a lot of things. You are sacrificing career opportunities abroad, hell lot of things. A lot of money and stuff and everything. The lifestyle also, right? Lifestyle choices are all under compromise. So some kind of understanding earlier on with your partner helps a lot, because they also are going to be paying with whatever you're going to do, and basis on time, money, lifestyle, these things, everything. So it might make sense to have a discussion earlier on and have them in your team.
Right.
So we probably had her
force them in your team.
So we had her supporting us early on with the first when we were the call center, customer support care and all. Probably over the weekends they would help us out and all, and everybody was involved. Yeah, but this was also we choose a business in which your weekends are the most loaded, and we are coming from a 5-day week culture, right? And it was a big enough cultural shock for us, right? Yeah. So I think everybody has to find their own these things, but
Afsal?
So I had married 6 months before starting up.
Okay.
So it was not only managing the expectations of my wife, it's also about the extended family. I was lucky to have a partner who was able to understand the challenges in starting up, but at the same time the excitement of starting up and being an entrepreneur on your own. So she was very, very supportive, and that helped us because we looked at how we will be able to build the company and weather the time when we will not have multiple income opportunities.
Right.
So at least for the first 1 year when I'm not able to bring any income to home, she was very supportive in terms of telling that we would manage all the expenses, defining a way in which our lifestyles won't get hit, but we are able to build this up. So it was same for all three of us, because we had our wives working, and that helped us comfortably get onto this phase of starting up, being on your own for some time, managing expenses, till we could start generating income out of the startup.
Okay, Reebu, you have something to add?
Sure. So my experience has been a little different. That I got married about 10 days before starting up.
So you guys are beating each other, right?
Yeah.
He got married earlier, 6 months. Then you said, no, I'm the biggest. I got married only 10 days.
Kind of, yeah. So the point is, I think we all need to find our own way out, right? There's no question about it. Starting up takes a lot of your time. Family time that you could have spent with your family, to the point that the company and your founders are more family than your your blood relatives in that sense, right? And each person has to find out how best to balance the life, the requirements at home, right? I guess all of us have been lucky in that we have had very supportive families, who took a lot of our absence sportingly, right? And touch wood, things have worked out well, kind of. So,
okay, excellent. Now, let's talk a bit more, something a bit more personal. So can you tell us about something about yourself that is not commonly known? So Reebu, you go first. All three have to answer this.
It's an interesting question, something that is not commonly known.
Commonly known between the co-founders, or
Probably between you guys may not be that much of a secret, but maybe to other people within the company or outside the company or other friends circle. So something that is not commonly known about yourself. Or you can take time to that. Maybe.
That's a good way anyways.
Praful will start, or
Afsal's forte.
once again. These guys would know about this particular stuff. So I'm a philatelist, which I don't think anyone in the company would have known. Just because these two guys have heard me talking about it, they would have understood it. So philatelist is someone who collects stamps, and
right.
It is a serious hobby. So I've been doing that for the last 25 years.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm also part of multiple philatelic committees.
Okay.
One which is there in Karnataka, then there is one in Malaysia, Singapore. So that is something which gives me freedom from everything else. I get some self-time when I spend on philately, and that's a passion which I have been continuing for the last 25 years, and I'm sure I will keep that alive.
Great. So how big is your collection? How do you define number, or number of countries? Number of stamps, how do you define?
So that's how I started, but now I've started focusing on a particular theme, which is on tigers.
Okay.
So I have about 600 plus stamps of different countries on tiger.
Okay, brilliant. Praful, something about yourself, not known?
It's very difficult to keep things about yourself hidden, when you are an entrepreneur. You're pretty much out in the open, but
Something like, I've heard answers like, I'm an adventure freak, or I love outdoors, I love long distance driving, I like cooking, I like dancing.
yeah. So on a lighter note, I once managed to have breakfast in Europe, lunch in Asia, and dinner back in Europe.
Oh,
So-
okay.
Feed I managed in the same day.
Okay.
So yeah.
Praful,
There is nothing about me. I'm an open book.
Okay, cool. We'll pass on to the next question. So that's okay. We got something nice from Afsal. We'll pass on to the next question. So what's the best advice somebody has given you, or alternatively best advice you have heard? All three.
So, okay, Reebu here. So, I guess the best advice that I've ever received is never to give up, right? Whatever happens, it's your idea. The world may say no, right? And we have had quite a few people tell us no, and in a nice manner. I mean, they were concerned for us, so they said, look at other options. But we stuck to the grind, and the advice of never give up is what paid out at the end of the day for us. So that's probably the best advice I've got.
Great. Sir?
The first thing that comes to my mind when you say the best advice we ever heard is the statement which Steve Jobs has made on time. So what he has said is time is the most precious resource that's available to all of us, and how you spend that determines where you will be. So that's so relevant for startups. As Reebu has also said, it is about utilizing that time really well and not spending too much time brooding on it, acting on it, and continuously improvising that.
Right. Excellent.
I don't know whether this is advice as such, but still, one of the mentors that we had once we started off Delyver, one of the things that he told us, sat us down and told us, is that you might be doing all things that is right, but having done everything that is right, operating in a market which is huge, and everything which is positive, tick for to build a large startup, but there is always a small element of luck in the whole startup space, right?
Right.
So it could be just that the whole economy tanked because of some issue that you might be in for something. It does not really matter whether you walk out of this with a lot of money and stuff like that and all. But if you are able to walk out of the startup, and at the end of the day, if you just have your shirt on your back, but you're able to hold your head high and walk out, right? Then you guys should consider it as a good successful journey, right? A journey which is good enough to have spent time and effort on.
Right.
So, which is something which we had at the back of our mind while we went through the whole thing, right?
Okay. Excellent advice. I just want to come back to you, Reebu. Maybe this question isn't specifically for you, but something that you talked about, never give up, kind of triggered this in me. So, you're mentioning that a lot of people said in a nice way, maybe this won't work out, change and things like that. So, what's the difference, you would say, between being persistent versus being stubborn and continuing to work on a failed idea? How would you, in your experience, differentiate between the two?
Sure. So I think one of the things that an entrepreneur must know is he or she should have a sense of when to walk away, right? If it's required. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm having a slight cold, but right. Let me explain it to you from Delyver's perspective, right? We were India's first hyperlocal commerce firm, way ahead of any of the numerous companies that have started up in the last couple of years, right? We started in 2010, and when we went around trying to raise money and convince people of the idea, including the sellers to come on our platform, etc., we found a lot of resistance. Some of it was simply because they couldn't understand the idea. Some of it was that this would not work. Some of it was, this is not yet done anywhere else in the world. People tend to find comfort if it's already executed somewhere else, right? And then you become a copycat model. But we are trying something very different. And we sat down. We faced a lot of rejection. We sat down and we thought about it. And what we realized was that, the market is not ready for it. It doesn't mean your idea is bad, right? We realized the market is not ready. Probably there have to be some changes in the market, etc. Cut to 2014, right? The changes that we expected, technology had improved, mobile connectivity had improved. There were a few models, similar models started in the West, and there was a lot of hype going around it with funding, etc. And suddenly the ecosystem just opened up, and the idea came of age, right? And what we started in 2010 helped us move on with the idea, and this is where we have reached, and a lot of other startups have failed along the way, right? So the first instance was knowing that you had to give your due, you had to put in the effort, because it was not because the idea was bad, it's just that you were a little early for it, right? The second instance, the time had come and we made it work, right? And that's what it is. So I guess the difference is that you have to judge it from, when people give you advice, good or bad, you have to be able to understand what's being said and then take a very realistic call based on the environment, based on other scenarios, etc.
Right.
And then take a decision to.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that, Reebu. Now, we all know that startups come with a lot of pressure. So, can you give us some tips on how we can handle pressure when things aren't going so well?
Let me put it this way, okay. There are multiple kinds of pressures. One is the funding related pressures and your money running out in the bank, your fundraise pressures, all those kind of stuff. There are operational pressures of having to do long hours, some kind of family urgencies and stuff like that, right? One thing which was good for us, because there were three of us as co-founders, is that even at the toughest of times, there would be at least one person who was still in very high spirits on that particular day, right? So that could just bring the energy back onto everybody else, right? And this could be somebody else every single day, right? So and when it comes to some things not going well with respect to inside workings and all, we could always sit down and figure it out, right? And we were not in a hurry to execute, and this thing we would take our time to execute it correct, get the customer experience at the best possible for us, right? And hence those pressures were easily more manageable, right? But I think it was having a co-founder team with multiple people in it, which did help us ease out on a lot of pressure.
Okay, so that nicely ties in with my next question, which I think you answered. So my next question was, how important is it to have co-founders in a startup? Now, this is really a great answer that you gave, that the co-founders are important when there are pressures. So is it like an unanimous agreement that you need co-founders in a startup to be successful, or do you think single member founders can also be successful?
I think both work, right? But our experience, at least my feeling on this, is that it definitely helps to have a co-founder. Like Praful just mentioned, there are days when you're down, and having your partner or your co-founder in good spirits and him pulling you out of the wood on that day, or taking the load off your shoulder and saying just go off, go take a break and I'll manage, it is a huge thing, right? Doesn't mean that single founders don't become successful. Lots of stories there also, but I would put my boat the other way.
Okay. So can you tell us about your worst entrepreneurial moment? And how did you turn it around, and the lessons you learned from that experience? Could be just on Delyver, one of you can take the question, or if each of you has a personal worst moment, you could share it.
See, for us, let me put it this way. As a business model, we had probably stuck on with what we had started off quite early itself. It was to get all the retail outlets in the neighborhood to come online and shop, and you being the platform where people can shop from them, right? Probably we were bootstrapped at about for almost about a year and a half, at that point in time, we had, probably ran out of funds to expand and stuff like that, and all, right? So that was a low point. In the sense, like, we had kind of gone already, negative about the whole thing, right? We have spent more money than we actually had in bank, and we were there at that point in time. But so I think that was one of the points in time when actually we ran out of cash. Otherwise, we used to be very, very judicious with utilization of cash and everything of that sort. But the frenzy with which we used to meet investors at that point in time to get angel round of investment and all, and to convince people at those times about an idea like hyperlocal, right? Even the word hyperlocal was probably not used at those times.
Right.
Yeah, so we went negative and then we actually managed to close a deal, right?
Yeah.
So
Out of desperation, you had no choice.
not really out of desperation, but it was working on the way, and we were going into negative with that parallel events, right?
Okay.
So we were trying to raise angel investment and everything of that sort. We were meeting people, all those things also, right? So I don't think the investors ever knew that we were in the negative and we raised money.
Okay.
We always used to portray as if we had enough cash in the bank always.
Okay, and so you would say that was kind of the turning point when you raised the money. Was that like a turning point? Like
It was a vote of confidence at least, yeah.
Right.
At least, yeah. So Ganesh and Meena and Srini invested in us along with Shankar Marwada, who is a co-founder of Marketix. Yeah. So that investment came as a vote of confidence in the whole idea as such, and something could really be worked out on it. So from there, from being a neutral this thing to going down and then bouncing back on the basis of having all of them come on board, not just with the money, but as people who could advise us and through the journey, right?
Right.
It was a turning point for us. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Now, of course, this chat won't be complete without talking about your acquisition of by BigBasket. So, being acquired, of course, is one of the dreams of many entrepreneurs. Next only to IPO, I believe. IPO is the aim. So, how did you guys manage to do this?
So we were in the market to raise funds. We are also open for strategic investments, right? With BigBasket, they were into inventory-led model of and a slot-based delivery. This thing for groceries. It was time. It was a good time for them to also to introduce an express delivery of groceries to cater to a particular grocery purchase behavior. Right. So, and they knew that we had the understanding of the market, understanding of the operations, the tech know-how, everything required to build something like that. Right. So currently, what we are doing is rolling out grocery deliveries for BigBasket in 1 hour under the BigBasket Express thing. We have already done it across about 10 cities. Right. Also, we had a lot of expertise in setting up marketplaces and running the neighborhood marketplaces.
Right.
We are again setting it up as another business called the BigBasket Specialty Business, wherein we bring neighborhood specialty stores, which are grocery-related stores, onto the platform. So there was a lot of fit between what we did and what they were looking for.
Right.
And it was pretty complementary skill set that both the companies had, and it made for a good acquisition.
Right. But in maybe simple terms, like for a founder listening out there, if they obviously they want to go IPO, right? But if not, is it like worth building a company to be acquired, or is it like do the best in your market? What would you say is like one line of advice, kind of that can fit into how you were acquired by BigBasket?
So let's be very candid here. If you take money from investors to build your company, at some point in time you have to give them returns, right?
Right.
That could be through an IPO, it could be by getting acquired, it could be by becoming immensely profitable. So there are multiple options around it, right? And as an entrepreneur, there will be times when each of these options are presented to you, and you have to decide, what's right for you, what's not right. So we all know the famous story of Justel, not going IPO for 14 years. Multiple times he tried and didn't, but he held out and then finally went IPO in the last year or so, right? There are cases where companies were offered huge sums of money, didn't sell out, and then finally got acquired for a very small amount of money. So there's no real right or wrong path, right? It varies from each person to each company to the other, right? But it's important for the founder to really be able to take a call. And trust me, money is not the factor that finally decides. There will be so many other things which come into play. Money would probably be way down that list, right? You would be more involved, more concerned about what you have built, the legacy you leave, the employees you have hired. Because my experience has been that many of these employees you personally identify with them, right? When people joined us, we never looked at them as employees as such. It was more an extended family, and we could personally identify, and they could with us also, right? Spend many, like Praful said, the weekends are spent in office because we chose a business that was simple, and that builds a shared relationship. And then you start thinking about them, etc. So there are multiple other factors, and you take a call based on where you are.
Excellent. Thank you very much both for that. Now, I already mentioned that in the intro that you guys pioneered a lot of things in India. So, talk us through some of these. Maybe pick one or two of these. And how did you guys decide that you could be the first to do that? How did you know that you would be successful in something that has never been attempted? Maybe just pick one of the things that you pioneered.
So the first thing which we say that we are the first hyperlocal neighborhood commerce firm. When we started, there wasn't any other company which was trying to do the same thing. As Praful had mentioned earlier, the word hyperlocal itself was not popular. Right. So we started up without claiming to be the first hyperlocal. So we realized that there is a good need for bringing these neighborhood stores online. And then we identified categories which are relevant for a consumer in the neighborhood. We brought them together.
Right.
So that was something which we did, which wasn't there anywhere else in the country.
Right.
Once we started doing that, since you are the first comer or you are the first player who is trying to do something like this, there are a lot of associated things which again you will not find either a readily available supplier or a product. So you go into building all those products which are required for getting your model also live. For example, when we started doing delivery of food, we realized that the food need to be delivered hot and fresh, and hence we need carry bags.
Right.
The hot bags, which are nowadays being used by every single delivery company. So we realized that there is no products as that which is available. So we went to a guy who was making bags for the pizza companies. We sat with him, we designed a prototype. We were the first guy who gave him money to build a mold for that. And now we know that that guy is supplying to every other hyperlocal company in the country also. So we clearly know because we created that product.
Right.
He also claims that we were the first customers for him. So that gives us a conviction that since we were the first players in this field, there were a lot of things. One is this particular bag. Then we were the first company again to launch breakfast delivery.
Right.
So there are a lot of such restaurants available in Bangalore where we went to them and told them that we will start getting orders online for them. The sagas which are omnipresent in Bangalore.
Right.
There wasn't anyone who was doing that.
Right.
So we were not looking at records in some book and saying that, boss, there is nothing available in that and let's create that.
Right.
We realized that there is a definite gap.
Right.
And we went ahead and then filled in that gap.
Okay. Yeah. So you didn't look at it as doing something new. You just looked at it as a gap or as a need, and you went ahead and solved the problem. And now, in hindsight, you can look back and say, you know what, we were the first.
Correct.
So that's a great story. So thanks for that. Now we just have like a few more questions, just 2 or 3 more questions. Now, Delyver is close to 6 years now, and hindsight is always 20/20. But if you were to do things different when you first started, what would it be?
There is a difference between probably in India about going back 6 years and the current situation, right?
Right.
So if you are an entrepreneur who wants to probably start up today, the way that you need to approach is a bit different in the sense like the ecosystem is much more mature, right? So it may not be that you need to bootstrap yourself and spend 2 years to get angel round of funding, right? Those kind of timelines are all gone, right? So while you are contemplating the idea of starting up itself, you could plug into a lot of these networks, and by the time you are out of your job, you could actually be somebody who is probably in the deal for a small angel round of funding, so that you can do your prototype, your product market fit, all those things, right? Today it is also possible to raise money before you prove a lot of traction or complete product market fit of your product. All this kind of stuff is possible today, right? So I would say that also that if you have to go back and do, we could possibly have networked. Possibly network much more, because that's one thing that matters in entrepreneurship. Right?
Okay.
So for startups, future is going to be much better than today, and that's going to be the case for any new companies which will come.
Right.
The advance of technology, which we have seen in the last 3-4 years,
right,
it's created so many opportunities for companies to start up, and that's going to be the same thing in future as well.
Right.
So it's about identifying the right ingredients for your startup,
Okay.
and then starting at the right time of the market maturity.
Okay.
That's going to define whether you would become a roaring success immediately.
Okay.
Probably that if you see the trend right now, starting a little earlier could have helped. When you're pretty much on your own and you have a lot more flexibility, etc. Right. So if I did go back, I would say maybe rather than wait to start 2010, I should have started in 2006 maybe.
Excellent. So, can you recommend any books or resources for our budding entrepreneurs?
So I'll recommend the book Execution by Ramcharan. Simply because one of our investors once told us that with 8 billion people on the planet, no ideas are original, right? Everything's already been tried, and if you see Facebook, there were multiple other social media sites out there. So the whole success factor in a startup is essentially execution. How well you execute your idea better than somebody else, and that's what really makes a difference. So if people think just ideating helps, I would beg to differ. It's all about executing it. So that's a book I would recommend.
Okay, Afsal, any book?
There's a book which all three of us have read, which was gifted by Praful, which is Delivering Happiness by Tony C.
Yeah,
Zappos. So it was much relevant for us because we were in the business of delivering products, and we realized that we were delivering convenience to the customers, and hence we wanted to make sure that happiness is a package which we are delivering.
Okay, brilliant.
I would also actually go with Execution as a book that people should read. But since Reebu already mentioned it, probably, I think Lakshmi Bansal's Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish, and that series of books there, which she has written, captures a lot of entrepreneur stories and the struggles and triumphs associated with the same thing, right? It was very inspiring for us when we started off to read that, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thanks a lot for that. So I just have one final question. But before we move on to that, how can our listeners get in touch with you? Are you guys active on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter? Do you have a blog? What's the best way to reach out to you guys?
Sure. Yeah, LinkedIn and Twitter is good. Otherwise, our email IDs are firstname@delyver.com for each of us. Yeah.
Okay. I just have one final question, but before I move to that, I just want to take the time to acknowledge and thank you for sharing your knowledge to myself and our listeners.
Sure.
And I'm also very grateful for the value you are adding into the world by means of your startup. So with that, we'll move on to the final question. So if there is one gyan that you could give our would-be founders, what would that be?
So I'll stick on with the answer that I probably heard, or the advice that I was given earlier, which I mentioned earlier also, right? This whole startup thing is not about anybody else. It is not about whether you have sold your company or gone to IPO or anything of that sort. It's your journey, right? And at the end of the journey, even if you are okay with the fact that you just have a shirt in your back and you are able to hold your head high and walk away or walk out of it and be happy with the whole thing, then it is time well spent, right? So having that mindset takes away a lot of pressure from you, makes the journey enjoyable as well. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Afsal?
Yeah. So I've loved two taglines. One is do it to yourself and do it now. Most of the startups learn stuff by the co-founders doing things first and then understanding the product and then building a team for doing that. So as founders, you should be ready to do it. If you are building a product, you should try to use it first, see how it behaves, and then make sure that you are able to build a better one out of it. And second one is do it now. You can't wait for posterity. You have to make sure that any moment available to you now, you utilize it really well and see what comes out of it. So it's not about too much of ideation, it's about execution immediately followed by crystal clear ideation.
Okay, Reebu?
Yeah, so I would say that the best time to start up is not today. It was yesterday. Since you've not done that, you might as well just go ahead with it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, all three of you, for your wonderful advice and time. And it was a real pleasure chatting with you. And wish you continued success in your venture.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thanks.
There you have it, folks. Another inspiring story of a startup and its founders. I hope you enjoyed it. Do check out the show notes over at foundersgyan.com/EP30. Also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. The address is facebook.com/foundersgyan and twitter.com/foundersgyan. We provide multiple tips and resources for startups on these links. So if you're a startup or looking to start, you'll find the resources invaluable. I'll see you all next week with yet another inspiring startup and their founder. In the meantime, I hope you got inspired and do take action on your own startup today. Goodbye for now and stay inspired.